What's up, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Amplify Bible Study. Now, keep in mind, if you have not already done so, head over to the Facebook group, facebook.com/group/Amplify Bible Study, and join up. That is where you can find all of the discussion questions that go along with these videos. So let's go ahead and do a quick recap, because what we're going to be looking at today requires us to understand a little bit and go back and look at what we looked at last week. We just saw this, actually two rebellions in one almost, it seemed like, right? And then last week we saw that Aaron stopping that plague that was going around with one of the censers that was pulled out from the rubble and from the ashes of the Korah rebellion. But there's something very important that needs to be highlighted from Aaron stopping that plague. And it deals, and what I'm going to talk about now is directly leading into chapter 17 of Numbers. Because back in chapter 16, something happens that we have to understand the importance of to be able to grasp what we're going to be looking at today. So, let's go back and take a look at chapter 16, and in particular, chapter 16, verse number 36. And what we see is, then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, to remove the fire pans from the burning debris, because they are holy, and scatter the fire far away." Look who was instructed to do this. Eleazar, Aaron's son. Now you might ask, well, what's the importance of this? It is incredibly important to understand this, because by commanding Moses to do this, and by choosing that specific person to do it, what we see here is God is legitimizing the priestly line of Aaron. Because remember, Korah was the one who had started the rebellion. And what we see by having Aaron's son be the one to go around and purify all of the things that were holy while the rebellion was going on, is God sending a message that the Aaron line will continue. So we see at the end of chapter 16, Aaron stopping the plague with one of these censers that his son has purified. So let's go ahead and dive in to chapter 17, which is what we'll be looking at today. And it's Numbers chapter 17, and I've gone back to the CSB. I've kind of bounced around between CSB and New King James, and I like how the CSB has chapter 17 written. So we're going to be looking at this in chapter 17 in the CSB, but if you have a different translation, that's fine, because we're going to go verse by verse, so you'll be able to follow along. So, verse 1, the Lord instructs Moses. 3 or 4 words there. The Lord instructs Moses. Now, pause for a minute, because I want to touch on something. We actually see this phrase, or this type of wording, in the book of Numbers over 150 times. Why is that important? Because if you think God didn't choose Moses, that should be all the proof you need right there. The Lord instructs Moses. Clearly, God is the one who has chosen Moses to be kind of the mouthpiece for him towards the Israelites. He is the one that God is speaking directly through to give the message to the Israelites. And I bring this up because we've just got finished studying a rebellion where people questioned the legitimacy of Moses and Aaron's authority. But we see over 150 times the phrase, the Lord instructed Moses. The Lord instructed Moses. What did he instruct him to do? Verses 2 and 3. Speak to the Israelites and take one staff from each of their ancestral tribes, 12 staffs from all the leaders of their tribes. Write each man's name on his staff. Write Aaron's name on Levi's staff. because there is to be one staff for the head of each tribe. So what we're seeing is this is the third in a series of events where the line of Aaron is going to be vindicated from the opposition that it is going up against. This is number 3 in this series that we're seeing here. They select 12 staffs, right? The staffs were the symbols for the leaders of each tribe, each of the 12 tribes, and each leader of these tribes had a staff. And what we see here is God telling Moses, collect those leaders' staffs, and then write the name of that leader onto the staff. And he makes it clear, God makes it clear, that Aaron's name is to be the one on the staff for Levi. Why? Because if what is about to happen is a godly event, then Aaron's name on that staff will help solidify the legitimacy of his leadership against another rebellion like the one they just saw happen with Korah. So he's telling them to do this, right? Now let's look at 4 through 7. Then place them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony where I meet with you. If you kind of had a little brain slip up and forget what the testimony is, this is the 10 Commandments. This is the stone tablets that would be in the Ark of the Covenant. So the tent of meeting in front of the testimony, in front of the Ark, that also has the manna in it as well. That's where they are to place these staffs. The staff of the man I choose will sprout, and I will rid myself of the Israelites' complaints that they have been making about you. So Moses spoke to the Israelites, and each of their leaders gave him a staff, one for each of the leaders of their tribes, 12 staffs in all. Aaron's was among them. Moses placed the staffs before the Lord in the tent of the testimony. We see here Moses, as usual, complying with exactly what God has asked him to do. I say as usual, there was one time he didn't, okay? Yes. And he does have some little head-butting with God, I guess you could say. But this is normal. This is something that Moses does. He does what God tells him to do. And it's important to pick up on that, right? He does exactly as God instructs him to do here. He takes the staffs and puts them where they are supposed to go. Verse 8, the next day Moses entered the tent of the testimony and saw Aaron's staff, representing the house of Levi, had sprouted, formed buds, blossomed, and produced almonds. God is giving a true physical manifestation here that the priority of the Aaronic priesthood is from him. You can't argue with this. The fact that the staff of Levi had sprouted would have been nothing short of a miracle. Why? Because staffs are made of what? Wood that is dead. They're pieces of wood that would have been carved out, right? So there's nothing that should be growing on them, nothing that should be living on them. Staffs cannot produce living things on them. Yet, not only do we see that there were sprouts produced on the staff of Levi, but we also see what? That they had budded and produced almonds, something that would not have been possible without a godly intervention. This is not the first time we see a godly intervention either. Remember, in chapter 16, how are the rebels destroyed? The people who are, going up against God in the God's choice of Aaron destroyed. They're swallowed up. The earth basically becomes like a monster, it says, and they were swallowed up alive into the earth. Like God, something that is godly, something that is a godly representation that cannot be replicated by man. That's what we see here as well. God is saying, I am going to provide you with the proof of what these men are saying to you. This would have been the final act, that convincing act, that final convincing act that no one would be able to replicate. No one is going to be able to do this. No one's going to be able to say, well, look, I was able to do this too, so we still don't know if it truly is God that is working through you. Verse 9, Moses then brought out all the staffs from the Lord's presence to the Israelites. They saw them, and each man took his own staff. Imagine what a humbling experience this would have been. Because the entire point of this exercise was God was going to show who the true leader of the priest was. And imagine this. Here comes Moses out with all those staffs, with all the staffs to be distributed. And each man now has to go up and get theirs. But it's not meant to shame the men. This is something that's very important. This wasn't some godly act meant to shame those who he did not choose. This act of handing the staffs back would have been an act for them to silently reflect on God's choice and to silently understand the sovereignty of God. We have to do this sometimes. We have to be humbled sometimes. Every single one of us needs to learn this lesson. Even if we say, well, I'm chosen by God to do this. God chooses us all for a specific task while we're here on earth. There is no question about that. But he also chooses the priority that some people have while doing those tasks. And that is what we have to be humbled with. I pray every day for God's leadership, and I pray that I am going within his will. And I think, doing this show, doing my podcast, helping out at church, the job that I have as my day job, all of those things are what he is wanting me to do. But he also puts people in positions of godly authority over me to make sure I am staying within his will. And if I'm not, I do need to be humbled at times. And that's what we see here. This isn't a shaming thing that's going on. It's a reflecting thing. Here is what I have told you. God has spoken. God has said, finally, for a final time, Aaron is the leader. Aaron is the priestly leader. Don't be mad about it. Don't be ashamed about it. Accept it and reflect on now how you can move forward with that information. Who is in your life that God has put over you in a godly leadership role? Are you showing jealousy toward that person? Are you doing your own little core rebellion against that person? Or are you accepting it and working together for the common good of the kingdom? So let's go to verse 10. The Lord told Moses, put Aaron's staff back in front of the testimony and keep it as a sign for the rebels, so that they may put an end to their complaints before me, or else they will die. This would be an ongoing sign, a continual sign that is always there about this, about the legitimacy of Aaron in the priestly service, or the line of Aaron, not just Aaron, but his line in the priestly service. Aaron's rod, Aaron's staff, would sit right there with the 10 Commandments and the manna in the Ark of the Covenant as a reminder. But, notice where it's sitting. This is a reminder that would not be seen by many people. This is a reminder that would have to be passed down and told about from people, but it's not going to be seen by many people. Why? Because look where it is. It's in a place where very few are going to go. Very few are ever going to enter into that inner circle of the tent of meeting. This is one of those things that's going to be passed down. Later generations would be told about it. It's not going to be on display in public somewhere. But it is still going to be a reminder. So Moses did as the Lord commanded. Moses, we see once again, a completely humble and faithful servant to God, carrying out his instructions as God has asked them to, even with the burden of all that opposition that he has on his shoulders. This line right here, verse 11, should be a rallying cry for us in the world today. Verse 11 should be what we stand up and what we bolster and make as a foundational verse for us. Because look where it falls. Moses did as the Lord commanded. This falls after 2 rebellions Moses has had to squash. The opposition keeps throwing stuff at him, and what does Moses do? He does as the Lord commands. And he does so without complaining. He does God's work. And isn't that what we are supposed to be doing? Isn't that the main thing? It's not what other people are telling us. It's not what other people are saying to us. It's not the stuff and the garbage that other people are throwing at us. But it's what does the Lord command us to do? Verse 12 and 13. Then the Israelites declared to Moses, "Look, we're perishing. We're lost. We're all lost. Anyone who comes near the Lord's tabernacle will die. Will we all perish?" What is it they're saying here? Well, this is a culmination of these 2 chapters combined, of chapter 16 and chapter 17 combined. We're seeing this culmination here at the end of chapter 17, because the people of Israel, the people of the tribes, have convinced themselves that the very presence, the mere presence of it being in their camp, of the tabernacle being in their camp and within the tribes of Israel, means that they are in danger. I paused here because I want you to reflect on that one time. Because what are they saying? The presence of God puts us in danger. What's happening here? Because that's really what they're saying here, right? Look at it. Look, we're perishing. We're lost. Anyone who comes near the Lord's tabernacle will die. Will we all perish? Well, what's really happening here? They're understanding the weight of the sin they have just committed. They understand that the challenging of the authority of Moses and Aaron through these chapters here is finally starting to come to bear on them. It's finally starting to show, and it's finally starting to dawn on them what they have done against God. This is what we should feel when we sin. Right here, this is it. We're perishing, we're lost. This is what we should feel and how we should be responding when we sin. Anyone who comes near the Lord's tabernacle will die. What are they doing? They're trying to blame shift here, right? But God has told them what to do. God has instructed them how He wants them to live, just as God has instructed us on how He wants us to live. If we choose not to follow those instructions, well, are we going to perish? Yes. We're going to perish eternally. See, we might prosper here on earth by not following what God tells us to do. And when we do follow what God tells us to do, we might never prosper here on earth. But that doesn't mean we don't do it. See, here on earth isn't what the end game is. Here on earth isn't what the goal is. The goal while we're here on earth is to bring as many people into a relationship with God and with Christ as possible. That's the goal while we're here on earth. What we're talking about perishing and where we need to be concerned with perishing isn't here on earth. It's in heaven. or it's in eternity, I should say. Because if you don't do what God's asked you to do, and if you don't follow his commands, and you don't have that relationship with Jesus, you will be perishing in eternal life. This lesson, this chapter 17, it's small, only 13 verses, but so powerful when it comes to our relationship and our walk with God in Christ. So, the question I have, what do you get out of chapter 17? Let's start talking, people. Let's start getting those comments on the videos. Let's start interacting with each other. That's what the point of this Bible study is. It's not me talking to you the whole time. It's you all talking to each other in the community, in the private group. If you're listening to this through one of the podcast services, I urge you to go join the private group on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/Amplify Bible Study. It's a private group. Everything that's said in there stays in there. Let's get a discussion going about this chapter. And how does it affect you? And what did you take from it? Until next week, everybody, have a great week. Go out and continue to make those disciples for Christ. God bless you. And please, go enjoy the weather if it's like what you're seeing outside my window right now. Because fall is upon us, or almost there, I guess I should say. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week.